The Midwest Jewish Artists Laboratory Network is a 5-city project engaging over 70 professional artists in Milwaukee, Minneapolis, Madison, Chicago, and Kansas City. Together, we voted on an annual theme, and then independently, each city studied that theme, referring to sources from the Bible to the work of visual and literary and performing artists, to most importantly, the work of the artists themselves. Our goals were to make the artists aware of the many sources of Jewish wisdom that inform their work, including Jewish heritage and their personal Jewish histories, to make the community more aware of the incredible talent that we have in this community, and to enhance the understanding of the role of cultural arts in imparting Jewish values and Jewish traditions. The theme of this year's laboratory was Echoes, Voices of Jewish Wisdom.
The literal translation of echo, meaning responding to something that already exists or something that we've seen or heard, but then through our own filter, our own soul, we express it in a way that is relevant to ourselves, to our own generation.
When I think of Jewish wisdom, the only way for me to make sense of it is to think of it in terms of what Moses says in the Psalm 90, verse 12, in which he says, teach us to number the days, teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart to wisdom.
It's not just text. Text is one way of approaching it, and may be an added value because that's the sort of the beginning. But then, whether it's music, art, poetry, dance, all of the elements that one would consider artistry are combined and bring about a true appreciation for who we are.
When I first started thinking about the topic, I thought about these big topics, things like welcoming the stranger or tolerance or things like that, that were kind of universal values. And I was having a really hard time, while there was lots of words that you can find talking about those topics, it wasn't really translating to me into some type of piece of art that I could create. When I started to focus on what I was kind of doing in the meantime, and how there were words that then applied more personally to me, that's when it all kind of made sense.
Echoes, Voices of Jewish Wisdom immediately brought me to think about this enormous legacy that that is comprised of knowledge and experience. This vast legacy that our foremothers and forefathers left to us.
First reaction to Echoes, Voices of Wisdom is a sense of responsibility. I don't really know how else to describe that. It feels as though if something is wise, you better freaking listen to it.
And the wisdom of Judaism was inside of me, but I was never looking so deep.
My mind wandered from one thing to the next, the story of Abraham and the challenge he had with his son Isaac, how he met that challenge, the Mosaic story of standing at the edge of a broad sea, not knowing how to conquer it, and the courage it took. And I thought also of my Zadie and my father, with whom at various times in my own life I'd had very interesting discussions, not so philosophical with my Zadie because I was young, but increasingly philosophical as my father aged into his 90s. Well, I came to realize that my poetry and my writing, my non-poetic writing, have been more informed by my Judaic upbringing, my education, than I realized. I began this process not particularly certain that much of what I had written was the reflection of my Jewish education. And I've come in a year's time to realize that there is much, not all, but there is much that is informed by my identity as a Jew.
My bubby, my bubbler, would say, Alan, you nudnik, you nincompoop, you mashugana. Shlamil, I vey, here, nosh on something, eat something. You have no tuchus, here, eat. I gewalt. A Yiddische cup. Is that?
Yiddische cup.
Yiddische cup. A Yiddische cup you are not. Here, have a kishki and a bagel and a smear of cream cheese. Okay, next question.
I kept feeling like I was stumped, like I didn't know what I was going to do, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And my surprise came when I realized that I had already created this piece and I had already set it on a dance company, and it was inspired by this actual thing, and I never put together that was going to be my final project, but it was something that I just created inspired by it, and that was really, it was kind of a surprising moment for me, only because I didn't realize how much I was already influenced by the group, that it was something that had already come to me, and I didn't even put together that was going to morph itself into what my final project would be.
When I think of Echo, I always think that I'm at the very end of the tunnel and it's been bounced off a million different walls from the original voice. And it almost felt like we were thinking of echoes and thinking of like a watered down form of Judaism that we're getting several thousand years later.
And to come up and wrap it all together, all this experience, surprised me because I had so many stories that I wanted to convey. And I just had a hard time trying to put it all into one piece of art. So it almost seems like a series.
The words that I've used to echo are the words of Theodore Herzl, which are famous, Im tirtzu ein zo agada, if you will it, it is no dream, which described his vision for creating the Jewish state. But in my case, I thought of it more as becoming an artist, willing myself through this project by doing it every single day to go from not really thinking of myself as an artist, but to having a body of work that I could then point to and say, this is my artwork.
So if something's echoing, I'm presuming it's coming from a distance. Voices of Wisdom presumes a certain amount of experience beyond something that I would describe myself as having had. And so there's a sense of respect and honor and responsibility. I'm supposed to receive this echo and somehow sustain the wisdom that's coming through me that I'm supposed to say in my art. So I consider that an incredible responsibility.
There's this parallelism drawn by the Mishnah in Sanhedrin, this very well-known passage that states that whoever destroys a soul is as if she or he would destroy an entire world, and whoever rescues a soul or saves a soul is as if he or she would save an entire world.
My mom-in-law would say, Alan, you have schmutz on your face. You schmendrick. Relax, don't plotz. What are you wearing? Where'd you get that schmatza? That schmaltzy shirt? What dreck? Take that off, I am verklempt. We need to have a schwitz, a nice long talk. That shirt is a shander for the goyim, a shame before the Gentiles. I want you to look geweldig, like a real mensch, not a nebish.
And when I really started thinking about it, I was sort of thinking about if, from the broad perspective, if we could look at the Judaism we're living right this second, which is so profound and beyond anything our ancestors could have ever imagined, if we combine all the different ideas of having an Israel that we can fly to, having everything at our fingertips in the form of an app on my phone. I have a Torah and I have the entire Talmud if I want it, and the Siddur and a prayer book, and all of the things and all of the access to Jewish learning in unprecedented ways that I wouldn't have had even 5, even 10 years ago. If we think about like genealogy and the way that people are connecting to one another through the internet that we didn't ever have access to before. In that way, echoes almost seems like an old word that doesn't really even apply to now.
I don't feel as though I have a piece of wisdom that I am handing you like a fortune cookie or something, a fortune. I feel as though I'm putting something on a surface that gives us something material to talk about, and that it's our collective responsibility to each other to have a dialogue about it and move forward, and that was the wisdom is between us, not in me.
I have to say, not a surprise, but it was just getting along with everyone and learning about each other's art or just what they had to say, all the information was so gratifying.
I was almost even thinking of that old 80s very famous ad of the guy sitting like this. I think it was for like Hitachi Maxwell, where he was getting blown away by the Dolby stereo. So in a way, that's almost like what Judaism feels like to me. Like we have more access to more things than ever before. So it almost feels like echoes wasn't the right word, but I really worked with it and made it work for me.
The Shlemiel spilled his soup, and the Shlemazel spilled his soup all over himself, and the Shmagegi spilled the Shlemazel soup on the Shlemiel and himself, and the Nudnik asked, what kind of soup was it?